Recently, there was this conversation that a manager had with a more junior person on my team, where the more junior person was saying, like, I don't really like to, like, have to decide things. I would prefer for just be, like, told what to do. So I would prefer in my role if you just, like, tell me what to do. And most people are like that, right? Most people are like that, but that is really hard for a startup to be like, I just would like someone to just tell me exactly what to do. Like, we do not have time for that. If you do that, just know that, like, you're right in the line of fire for layoffs.
You know, they say women shouldn't be bossy.
We're out here reclaiming that word. What's so wrong with being the boss? Bossy.
Welcome back to Bossy. It is your favorite two girlies sitting on the couch talking about business today, the cooperative business that is. So we're talking about co-ops. Tara, do you know what a co-op is?
A co-op, okay. Co-op is cooperative, like you work together as a team on, I don't know, girl, what is it? What is it?
I love it. The first thing I always think of is REI, but no, so today we're going to be talking about a specific type of cooperative business, a worker co-op. We're going to talk about a couple real-life examples, and I think we should also talk about other related ways to run businesses that are similar to co-ops, but like not quite the same thing, and then we'll wrap up with an audience question. But before we do that, I just want to shout out that last night I was at a launch party for a fintech app in New York, and I met a couple of Bossy listeners. So I want to shout out Emily G, who has the business Travel by Emily, who we actually have talked about on the show in the past. She was there, and it was so fun to get to meet her in person and like ask her some follow-up questions about the business. And Sagar, who works here in New York, and he was like, Bossy is so helpful. Like, I love listening to it. I'm at a kind of a crossroads period right now, and I'm just like, it's helping me think through how to proceed. So it was really great to meet him too.
I'm always so impressed with like the things that our listeners are working on when they like either email us or comment in the chat and sort of like share, like, here's what I'm working on. I'm like, that's a cool business.
Yeah.
That's a cool, like, congratulations for that transition in your life. Like, people are working on cool, courageous things.
Yeah.
So I love that we get to like have that community.
Oh, it was so cool. Yeah. So I think to start talking about co-ops today.
Okay. I still don't understand what they are. So
I kind of feel like we should address the elephant in the room first, because I think people come at business for different reasons and with different intentions. Like, on one end of the spectrum, you have like I'll say the ultra ambitious, like the Jeff Bezos brand of human that's like, I want to have a unicorn, I want to have $1 billion business. I'm trying to be the biggest thing out there. And then you have people that are like, I want to be a solopreneur who has a lifestyle business that like works for me and funds the other things that I want to do. And then there's spectrums everywhere in between. So the co-op is like not the approach that you take if you are trying to be Jeff Bezos. That's like not the approach.
But it's just what you're saying. It's one of those in-betweens of like, it's maybe not either of those extremes. It's just like another alley or different approach for how you could start a business.
Yeah, I think like we typically, at least my interpretation of, I'm using air quotes here, business in general is a very capitalist framework, which is like, you are the founder, you're the owner, you reap the most rewards, and then you have employees that work under you and you pay them, but then there are profits, and the bigger the profits, like the more successful the business. This is like the opposite of that, which is that there is no one kind of owner that's sitting at the top that's like reaping the biggest benefits or the rewards or who has like the biggest compensation. It's like, we are all equal. We all have equal decision-making power, and it's like a more egalitarian way. So it's truly cooperatively owned. So it's like everyone is rather than having public shareholders or private investors, the owners and shareholders are the employees. That's the easiest way I could describe it.
I'm all the way skeptical.
All the way skeptical. Wait, so tell me why. Why skeptical immediately?
Because my personal experience of entrepreneurship is that it takes like an incredible amount of grit and like unreasonable level of commitment from a handful of or a founder to like infuse a level of energy into the business. And that is a level of energy and commitment that just most people don't have. Like, most people act like employees who like aren't problem solving, who aren't like, I'm gonna do I'm staying up all night no matter what it takes. And of course, there are people who are super entrepreneurial. Like, you can be an employee and think that way, entrepreneurial, but most people ain't that. They're just not. So I'm a little skeptical about like maybe if you get like a really great talented group of people together who are really committed to the cause, I could see that. But I think the benefit of capitalism is like there is such a significant upside to you in owning the business that you're willing to put in. Yeah, you're
it's
willing to put
a risk incentive.
Yeah, so I want to hear more about this so I can like understand. I might change my opinion.
Okay, cool. So I have a lot of data on this, thanks to Gabby, our producer, who really pulled together. Like, I was like, I want to know more about this. Please help me. And she's like, I got you.
She got the research.
Shout out Gabby for pulling this all together for us today. So, worker co-ops, businesses owned by workers, we've kind of established that. So technically, like how it works in the pros, the upside of this type of arrangement, there is equal status. So each member has equal power in the decision making. This usually translates to like 1 vote per person. If you're going to sit down and be like, we're making a decision about something, they're usually more sustainable. Hypothetically speaking, they're more sustainable. You're less likely to lay people off. So like the example we're going to talk about today is a media company. And so the alternative, we'll say the capitalist view of like, you know, you take investors and you have a lot of like other stakeholders that you have to make happy. And there's, you know, you kind of lose control in that way because like you as the founder potentially get diluted because in order to fundraise, you're having to give money or to give equity away. Like Vice, Condé Nast, Sports Illustrated, all of these media companies that we're seeing fold because they took private equity dollars or they took venture capital.
And they got like owners got kicked out.
And they got their asses kicked. Yeah. So it does depend on the co-op. Obviously, this isn't like a foolproof way, but because you're retaining all the control and decision-making power and equity within the business itself versus from outside funding, it stands to reason that like you're going to have less risk in that respect. They also find that employees just tend to be happier and have more buy-in. So it's like, oh, what I'm doing here matters. I have equity in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective with kind of how I see in the personal finance space, the middle class typically, like most of their net worth just statistically is tied up in their primary residence. They don't have equity in the companies that they work for. They don't have equity in public companies. So it's like they don't really, the middle class in general like doesn't have as much upside as like the you know top 1% or the top 10% does.
Yeah.
And so this is a way for like more workers to have upside and equity in the things that they are working on. And like, wouldn't that be novel if you could spend 30 years building something, if that's what you want to do, and feel like, oh, I'm not just like taking a wage. I'm actually like, if my work and if my contribution makes this more valuable, I see direct benefit from that. So that's kind of cool.
Do you think that there's a different kind of person? Because I'm imagining like if you're someone who wants direct impact, direct benefit from contributing in a company, the one option outside of co-ops is you just go start a company, right? But this is another option where you can work at a company and you can still have, you know, direct benefit from it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the same type of person who's like, I want benefit from what I do, upside from what I do, so I start a company, versus I want upside from what I do, so a co-op, joining a co-op might be better? Is that the same persona or different person?
I think they're different because I think the person that wants to do it themselves, I mean, I'm only inside my own head, so I only know my own mentality.
Yeah.
But like, I never worked as hard for someone else as I work for myself. And 100%. I never felt as bought in until it was my thing. But I do think that there is a level of kind of risk and delusion that you need to be able to do that or to want to do that. And I think that there's room for a middle ground where you aren't having to take on a bunch of risk. You still have stability, but you're more bought in. I just think it's a more like frankly natural way for people to feel bought into the business that they're working for.
Yeah.
Why would I care, frankly? Like, okay, I'm working for a Fortune 100 company. You're paying me $60,000 a year. I'm not staying past 5. Why the hell would I? 60K. I mean, like, there's no reason for me to care.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's where the natural incentive structure comes into play. So I do think that it's a similar mindset, but there is a difference in risk appetite, probably.
So let me ask you this question just for you personally. So that scenario you just gave, you're working at a Fortune 100 company, you're making $60K. I feel like you might be making more than that. I literally have
wasn't.
Okay, I have no sense of like what people's salaries are. I've been out of like the corporate game for so long, like I don't even know how that works anymore. Okay, but let's say that you're working at a Fortune 100 company, $60K salary. personally. And my question to you is, what would that like profit share or like sort of ownership structure? Because is it profit ownership? Do you get profit or do you get just equity?
You basically get dividends because you're an owner. So it's like you're kind of the way shareholders get dividends of public companies.
Okay, so what would the dividends, which is sort of like the money left over that you get paid, what would the dividends have to be in order for you to feel like this feels motivating?
I see.
Can you give me like a number of like what would feel good to you? Just personally.
I think it's less about a number and more about or less about a dollar amount, we'll say.
Yeah.
And more about a percentage share of ownership of like, I have just as much at stake here as the other people here do.
But what if it was like $5,000? Like company's profitable, but like not crazy profitable. And so the dividends there get you to like 65K. Does that feel good or it's still like...
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think like for me personally, I would rather have my own. Because I like you know what I mean? But like, I don't think that everyone feels that way. I think that for some people who want to work in a cooperatively owned business, it's like, that might be. Like, if it's 5,000 or nothing, or if it's like, oh, but there's a potential for it to be 20 if we hit these goals. And like, I see the direct impact of like, I'm working harder and doing better and I'm getting paid more for that because the business is doing better.
Yeah.
I think that that's very, I think that is very motivating, at least more motivating than like I get paid the same amount no matter what happens.
Okay, got it.
You know what I mean?
I wanted to ask you another question, but like anything else I need to understand about this model and how it works at
yes,
level?
There is a technical aspect that I think is important. So because you're not reliant on investors, you are technically, like the co-op is technically considered a not-for-profit business. So you're not trying to have profits. You're not trying to have a profit margin. The money that you're bringing in, you're either trying to reinvest in the business itself or pay it out to the people that are working for the business. So again,
not all that dissimilar to like a traditional business. Like my dad worked in nonprofits and like as the chief operating officer of the Urban League. So I think I got like a little insight in like how nonprofits work too, because I used to think nonprofits, they're like for not making money. Like you're not supposed to make money in a nonprofit. And actually nonprofits definitely have to make money. They have to fund all of their operations and the good work that they do. It's just that to your point, they reinvest those profits. But also lots of for-profit companies do that too, particularly for tax planning reasons. You don't want to be like, we made millions and billions of dollars at the end of the year. Or even if you're a small business, $100,000 profit at the end of the year is a big tax bill, maybe like 30%. And so you say, okay, we're going to like reinvest that back. We're going to like hire a different person. We're going to do R&D and you put it back in. So like that kind of cycle, I think people sort of think about those types of companies as like totally different, but like the mechanisms you can do to put money back into your company, like a nonprofit or for-profit, are similar here. So people are reinvesting in this scenario.
I think the key differentiator is that in a for-profit company that is publicly traded, the primary beneficiary of that reinvestment are shareholders, people that are not involved in the company, that just own stock.
That's right.
And the primary beneficiary in this model are the employees. So the questions that I had when I learned about this was like, functionally, how does this work? And it sounds like the membership is open. So like you could work there and like not opt in, but if you do opt in, you can choose to enter, and then usually you're like buying your way in, and it's like either through payroll deductions or like you are, or maybe through your own labor, like you are buying your way into the cooperative model. There is limited liability, which was another question I had, which is like, if I'm a part owner in this business and we get sued, like, is my ass on the line? And no, you're not responsible for like the company's debt, or it doesn't sound like, at least, you would be held personally liable for something that the company did, even if you are like a co-op. I'm not sure how legal liability gets distributed there, but it doesn't sound like that's like a main concern of this type of model. And then you do probably have a greater incentive to like keep your costs low.
Definitely.
And like think about like if you're working for a for-profit company and you're on an expense account for work travel.
Yeah.
You're not really thinking, you're just like, whatever. Whereas in this model, like you as an employee feel personally incentivized to look for ways to cut costs, because if their costs are higher, you're getting paid less. Your take is lower. So I think that's interesting. And there are some cons that we can talk about.
The ability of the average person to manage a P&L, I feel skeptical on. To be like a profit and loss statement, to be like, oh, okay, I looked at how much we're making, and I now see that there's some areas that we should cut of how much we're spending. So I'm going to open up the spreadsheet. I'm going to coordinate with QuickBooks. I'm going to do these things. Like, these are all things business owners have to do.
Yeah.
And most business owners don't like come out of the womb knowing how to do this.
Right.
You've got to like
Learn.
go educate and learn this stuff. And it occurs to me that like I'm thinking about it, like employees that I've worked with at companies, right? And like, I would not put my trust in them to be able to effectively manage this, like without there being like hierarchy of like someone saying, like there have been times where at Absolute Code we've had to cut back on expenses. It is the most challenging, like, oh, we've got to do this thing experience. And like I, as the CEO, have to make an owner, have to make a decision no one else wants to make. Like so much of like entrepreneurship is like making the call no one else wants to make. And I'm just like having a little trouble seeing a collective board of people making these like no one else wants to make it risky decisions. But I could see it depending on who it is and who's on the team, it would make a difference. So I'm curious like how hiring works, because like who you bring on board, I think would make a big difference here.
I do think that slow decision making can be a con. So I will concede that I think that can be a problem, is that if it's about compromise and voting and, you know, everyone coming together to make these decisions, it can be challenging. But I do think hiring is interesting because the Fortune 500 example I gave even is like kind of misleading, because I don't think you really, at least in practice, I don't think you really see that. Typically, co-ops are not giant companies that are trying to hire a ton of people. Usually it's like 20 to 30 people and like $1 to $5 million in revenue, we'll say.
Got it. Okay.
We're not talking, at least in practice today, like I am not aware of any worker cooperatives that are like billion-dollar businesses.
Got it. So like if we're looking at like $1 million business that maybe has like a healthy 30% profit margins, there's like $300K of profit, and that gets shared across like 20 people is kind of like how that might look approximately.
Yeah, I think that could make sense. So it's interesting too, because I think it's not as though like you hire someone and then immediately they're an owner. That was something that I also felt weird about, because I was trying to imagine this in my own life and being like, would I be comfortable just being like, oh, you're coming on? Here's 25% of money with Katie. Like that would feel very weird to me. So usually like you have to work there for a certain number of hours. There's like thresholds about that. There's, you know, you're, like we said, you're buying your own share in some cases. And so you're like paying into it with pay. There's some skin in the game that you're having to exert in order to get involved. And then, typically like at the end of the year, it sounds like they'll basically distribute your dividends or your shares of the business. So we can talk about a specific example. We'll be right back to the conversation after a quick break. Okay, back to the show. Have you ever heard of Defector Media?
No, what do they do?
So
Media, obviously.
Imagine this. You work for like one of the top sports blogs in the world.
Okay.
You're an employee of this sports blog that's just like super famous, and that company's getting bought out. So like, okay, new ownership is coming in. This is scary.
Yeah.
And they want to change what you're doing. They're like, this stuff that you guys like to do, this kind of like edgy, like whatever. No, that's not what we're doing anymore. We're going like this way. And you don't want to do that. So you and a bunch of your coworkers say, fuck it, and you quit. You leave. And you go and start your own media company, and you call it Defector.
Okay.
So it's like very fun. But all of these former, it was Deadspin, which was the sports blog that these people left. So they leave Deadspin,
Defector.
They come together, they start Defector, and they are all kind of co-founders, co-owners. They built it as a cooperatively owned business. Yeah. And they're super transparent about the challenges that they face, which is very cool. They publish these, like, you know how, is it an S1?
S1, yeah.
Every year that the big, if I'm a publicly traded company, I have to, is it an S1 every year that I have to file?
When you're about to go public, I think.
Oh, okay. What is the one that you have to file every year? There's like you have to publish so much information if you're publicly traded. You have to be very transparent with the public about what you're doing.
And they do something similar even though they're not public?
Yes. Yeah. Which is, by the way, why a lot of economists say that private equity is so bad for the economy, because it's all so under wraps that like, like having so much money tied up in private equity is bad for like public markets. Anyway,
I love companies that really openly share
Same.
what they're working on, and like where the CEO creates these blog posts of like, here's exactly how we have something structured. I love that. Okay.
So they do this every year, and they're 3 years in now. They just wrapped up their third year of business. Their revenue was $4.5 million. 85, this is crazy, 85% of their revenue came from paid subscriptions. That is so high for a media company. Like New York Times has like a booming subscriber base. Like New York Times is crushing. They are an empire. Only 60
versus advertising, like you would expect advertising to be way higher.
Yes. Only 67% of the New York Times revenue comes from subscriptions.
Oh, wow.
So the fact that 85%, that's very high. They have like very high subscriber affinity.
Okay.
Their other revenue came from like advertising, events, and merchandise, but that was like, I think, $100,000 increase from the previous year for Defector. But their total operating expenses is $4.4 million. So they are really like in the workers, in the company itself, they are really, everything that's coming in is basically going back out. And what I loved is in this thing, they literally put as a line item Taco Bell $28. Like they're like, let's
some
just
humor about it all.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, that seems low. You guys have like 20 employees. But yeah, so how they grew. So in 2023, their net revenue was 3.8 million. Now they're
like
at
looking at this on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
But what's so crazy is like the fact that they grew a lot. And I'm like, this is not an environment where media companies are growing. We are in an environment where media companies are closing their doors, are going bankrupt, are blowing up.
Yeah.
And they grew year over year. So I think that that's a really like kind of interesting proof point for how maybe cooperatively owned media companies are beneficial in war times, where you have this like dedicated subscriber base that really believes in what you're doing. Okay, so I do think that the Defector model is interesting. Their salary kind of like base pay situation is interesting too, like how they pay people.
Okay, is it high or low?
Well, every 2 weeks, everyone kind of gets the same base salary, but then everyone has different target salaries. So it's not like everyone makes the same amount of money. It's not that egalitarian.
Yeah.
But it's like everyone has this similar base pay, and then certain employees are like, depending on where you are in the hierarchy of like experience and whatever, and like what you're contributing, you have a different target salary that will get paid out if the business hits those metrics. So in that way, it's like not that different.
So it's kind of like, that's more of like a bonus structure based on your dividends. So how well the business does, then you get some amount. It's not, your salary doesn't change.
Right. And I think it's quarterly that they pay this out, is my understanding.
That makes sense.
I would love to have someone from Defector on this show, actually, to just talk about this and how this is.
And as you explain this, I'm really curious, like what listeners think about this. Either if you would be part of a company like this, like you would work for one, or you would start a structure like this. So maybe you guys can share in the comments on YouTube. We can see when you comment. I'm curious, like would you start one? Would you be buy into one? Because you kind of like buy into it. So would you be part of this, and why or why not? Like we can kind of debate it out and chat about it.
So they have 25 employees. Everybody knows what everyone else's target salaries are. They know that at the end of the quarter, like if they're getting those, if they're hitting those targets. And what's interesting too, as far as like how this like bleeds into their customer experience. If you get their most expensive subscription, which I believe is $100 a month, it's called the Accomplice subscription. You get to be on the quarterly Zoom calls and like give your input about how the company's being run and like what it's doing. So it's almost like shareholder meetings where they're like, you can like call in and like you can like join the calls in like publicly traded companies or whatever if you own stock. But it's like you are literally in a Zoom with the people running this company, and you're like, hey, I actually think you guys are doing too many articles about this. Like, I think you need to like change course there.
Okay, so this actually like helps me understand that it's not as intense of like everybody being exactly the same and having exactly same say. It's just like the dividends that come out afterwards. Is that right?
Yeah. I think that's probably a fair way to say it. And you know what? I think that because I agree, like, what you said earlier really resonated with me about like it takes an abnormal amount of like grit. It's an unreasonable commitment. So like when I think about where we are now, and if someone was to join us now, I'm like, yeah, but this was my whole life for 2 years before anyone else thought it was going to be anything and anyone else was working on it. And then for 3 more years, it was like me and one other person busting our ass. So it's like, for someone to come in and immediately have I'm like, that wouldn't feel right. Like, that would feel unfair.
It would feel unfair. And also, like, you haven't put in the hours of, like, skill set development on some things, maybe, that, like, sorry, not you have. That person coming in hasn't, that you have, right, in that scenario. Sure. And I'm thinking about, like, for example, we recently had a conversation. So we have a couple different layers of management at Apps Without Code now, which is sort of new in the last year or so. And so I now get reports on some of like what's happening with like some more junior people on my team. And like recently there was this conversation that a manager had with a more junior person on my team, where the more junior person was saying like, I don't really like to like have to decide things. I would prefer for just be like told what to do. So I would prefer in my role if you just like tell me what to do. And most people are like that. Right? Most people are like that, but that is really hard for a startup to be like, I just would like someone to just tell me exactly what to do. Like, we do not have time for that.
You need to go work at a Fortune 500 company where you can be where that's the expectation.
Where there's 5 people who have the same job and
you're
really
just an executor. Yeah, because when you're that big, you do need people like that will be like, yes, tell me what to do. I'm going to go do it. I will execute. I will do well.
Yeah, but even if you do that, just know that like you're right in the line of fire for layoffs.
Yeah.
If you're that kind of like if you think that way. So like I'm imagining if most people are like that and most people are like, I'll do the bare minimum, right? And there's a small little percent, either you've got to hire really well, which you could do, like maybe like hiring becomes super important for the co-op and like you put in like really like one of the things when I'm hiring, like what we look for on the scorecard is over and beyondness.
Yeah.
So like maybe like the index on the scorecard as you're hiring for the over and beyondness of the candidate has to be real high to be like, okay, now they're really like equally contributing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think though, like when we say, oh, most people just want to do the bare minimum, there is a part of me that pipes up that goes, I don't know if I think that's true.
Okay,
I don't know if I think that most people actually want to do the bare minimum or are happy and fulfilled and find purpose in doing the bare minimum. I think that with a more engaging and cooperative, like I think in models like this, you can unlock that piece of people that does feel like, okay, now I'm bought in. Now I want to be here. But like, I can understand with the current incentive structures in many jobs why doing the bare minimum is actually the most economically rational choice you could make.
Yeah.
Why would I do more? You're not paying me to do more. So if I don't have upside, why would I?
Yeah, 100%. That makes sense. It totally makes sense.
So it sounds like you wouldn't be super down for something like this, but is there any, I mean, there are related models, right?
So, yeah, there are other models that I think would be more aligned to what I would be inclined to do. So like similarly to what you were saying about companies that write these like long blog posts about like what exactly they do, there are a lot of companies in like the tech space that I watch because the founders really are super open and transparent. And Buffer is a really good example of this, the like social media scheduling company. And so they have a business, there's a blog post that they do frequently. Cool. There's one that I love on like, it's from 2019, but it's like how we gave like $500,000 to our teammates and nonprofits. Like here's our exact model for our profit sharing model, which is like profit sharing and dividend sharing kind of similar family. Sure. But they kind of walk through not only their structure, but other people's structures. So for Buffer, when they wrote this article, like 2015, they made $17K profit. 2016, they had a loss. 2017, they had a $2.4 million profit.
Oh my God.
2018, they had a $3.3 million profit. Right. So first of all, they're like, it's not always, it's kind of overall up and to the right, but it's not always directly that. Like sometimes there's a loss. Sometimes, and with a loss, you kind of reinvested more in the business.
Yeah.
So it's not just like always the same amount. Right. But they give a lot of that money to the team. So they decided that they're going to do 8 to 15% of the profit of the company goes to the like team profit share. And they also do like 20% of the profit goes to charity. Right. So there's these profit sharing pools.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Profit sharing pools.
You're like friends with the CEO, aren't you?
Yeah. Joel Gasquion. He's really smart.
We should have him on the show.
Yeah, it would be really great. It would be really great. So there's a profit sharing pool. Then of that profit sharing pool for the team, like team bonus, then it gets broken down. So 25% of what you get is like of the pool is equally distributed to all team members based on how many months they've been at the company.
Okay, so wait, 25% of total team bonus plus percent of total months you've worked there.
Yeah, there's like a calculation. So there's 3 categories of like that pool that gets pulled across. So the pool is like 8 to 15% of profit. Of that pool, 25% of that money gets distributed across based on how long you've been there, tenure. Another 25% is based on your salary, meaning like if you're a really senior person at the company and you like have a really big salary, you have a bigger piece of this. So it's kind of like more like how senior or junior your role is.
Okay.
But I think it's not only senior and junior because like they do have a lot of engineering. Engineers usually make a high salary. They're kind of like the highest earners at the company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like aligned to like your contribution at the company. And then also 50% is also like time-based too, right? So there's kind of like a combination of like, 25% is like equally, right? And then the 50% is like how long you've been at the company, like your actual overall tenure. So it's just based on these different things.
If you're just listening to this, I would recommend watching on Spotify or YouTube because we have the equations and whatnot up on the board right now, and I think it's really helpful to see it. Like, just hearing that, I was like, wait, what? But when you can see it, it's so much easier.
They have a math equation that they essentially put into Excel, right? Like, because the first one is just like based on how many people are there. Second one based on your salary. Third one based on like how long you've been at the company. Yeah.
Okay, and also I think I like this better. Because I think that this is so clear in the way that like, and maybe you could even layer this on top of it. I'm sure Defector has ways to determine what target salary is, but I actually like that there are kind of quantifiable okay, we're talking tenure, we're talking seniority, like there are very clear ways that we're arriving at these numbers.
Yeah.
And I think people can then, like even the retention, I bet, changes based on this.
The other thing I would do that maybe is a little bit different, and I've seen other companies model, is if I were doing it, I would have one of the chunks, probably like the 50% chunk, be based on performance. Like you have a performance review. And so if you did really well that year on your performance review, you're eligible for more of the pool. And if you're kind of slacking on your mackin', then maybe less.
Slacking on your mackin'. That does feel like that's what's missing.
You're directly incentivized. There's a performance component too. I crushed it this year. Here's what I did. It's not just like how long I've been here, and it's not just like how many people are at the company divided equally. It's like also, and I crushed it this year too. Right, I think I would add that.
I could see myself stealing that equation for sure.
Yeah, 100%. But the other thing too is like the way that the numbers play out for this, like in that same article, they break down like an example. So they're like, let's see how this would work in practice. And I think the only challenge about this example is like when I actually do the math of how much I actually get from the bonus, I don't know that I care that much.
How much is it?
Okay, so let's say that in this example that you're looking at a person who works at Buffer and they make like 90K.
Okay.
Right? This is software, so like maybe they're an engineer or something like that. And they've been on the team for 3 years, right? And there's a team of 80 people. So that first chunk is based on 80 people kind of divided across the board. And I think that would kind of give, let's say that the profit share is like 400K-ish, a pool. Right? The pool is 400K. So you get like $1,200 from that first piece, right? Just because like equally split first piece. Then the next one is based on like your salary range. So you make 90K and then you kind of say like, let's say we spend like $8 million on everybody's salary, right? So you get a percent of that based on your salary. So maybe you make another like $1,000 off of that.
Okay.
And then you've got the other 50%, which is like number of years that you've been at the company. So you've been there a certain number of years, but collectively the whole team has been together a collective X number of years.
Oh, so what's your percentage of that?
Yeah, and so maybe you make another like 2,500 off of that. So like maybe you're like looking at like a 5K-ish. Kind
that's
of
interesting.
Family of like what your profit share is. And to me, like that wouldn't necessarily change a whole lot for me, but it is sort of in practice and in theory, and I think same thing with the co-op, right? It makes you feel like rah. It's like the principle of it is more exciting than maybe the check.
I got you. That makes a lot of sense. Well, when I worked at Southwest, they did profit sharing, and I'm trying to remember what the percentage was based on, but I think the target percentage of profits that was shared out was like, there was a complex equation that would tell you like, based on how the company does and what the profits are, that would, shift the percentage. But if I recall, it was like they gave you, like my first year, I think I got $1,000 cash, and then maybe another few thousand into my profit sharing plan that was like attached to my 401k.
Yeah, I think Southwest's model is that it's profit sharing and you get payments of 11.3. I don't know how they arrived at this. 11.3% of your compensation is like the structure, right? If given that you've like done it for like a certain number, you've been at the company for a certain number of weeks and you've passed a threshold.
That sounds right. It's been a while since I've been there, but yes, that sounds right. And I remember being like, it's an interesting thing. Like I hadn't been at a company that did that before or since.
Southwest is known for doing that. Base Camp is also known for doing that. They have sort of like project management software and like client portals. And so they have a slightly different structure where they go, was this our most profitable year ever? That's the first question. And if yes, how much better did we do this year than the previous year? So like, let's say we did 25% better this year than last year, where like that's the amount that gets split across employees. So like that's how they do their structure.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to do a listener question?
Yeah. Okay,
cool.
So we have someone who's sent us a video, and so we can show their video and play the video and hear what they have to say.
Hi, I'm Bria, and I'm the CTO and founder of Honeybee Games. So I bootstrapped my company in 2020, and it's a mobile game business. I can't help but feel like there's a mental block inside of me that is preventing me from hitting my next revenue goal of at least $1 million a year. We're able to do $100,000 to $300,000 a year, no problem. But getting to $1 million a year feels so much harder. I want to know from the both of you, what qualities do you assess that you both have that you think helped you scale to 7 figures a year and beyond? Does people pleasing come in when it comes to holding people back? Do you think that trying to please your team can ever hold you back? I'd love to hear what you both have to say. Thank you.
I love this. I've met Bria in person before. I think we met at Afro Tech.
She's so cute.
She's awesome.
Her picture popped up on the screen and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
She's so cute.
Yeah, and I think the first time I met her, she was working a job. I think she was maybe at like Google or some like tech company like that. And so it's so cool to see like how she's like launched this company, and now like the way she said like we're no problem able to do like 100K to 300K.
Like hell yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
I also love that in the picture, she's like holding a cake in the picture that has a 1 on it. So I'm imagining that that's probably like her after the first year they were in business. She's just like,
Congrats.
Yes, congrats.
Celebrate the wins.
Yes.
I wish I celebrated 1 year of business. I just blew through it and moved to the next year. Dang.
Wait, one thing that jumps out at me though about the way that she asked the question is that she brings up the mental block. She's like, I think I have a mental block. So she's like, I'm thinking this is a mental thing, which immediately I go, this is someone who is smart and self-aware. The fact that she's like not jumping straight to it's a tactic, it's an approach. She's like, this is a mental thing. I'm like, brilliant.
That is a kind of question that you ask after you're at the place where you're like, we're making 100K to 300K, right? Because before that, you think all you need is a tactic. Like the tactics will save everything. And once you get to a point of business where you're generating revenue, you're like, oh, okay, tactics are great, but actually, like, I'm the one in the way.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yes. So that was interesting. It was also interesting that she specifically noted, can people pleasing or trying to please your team be that mental block? So like I'm reading between the lines and going, she thinks that she's a people pleaser and that's the mental block. Is that what you're getting from this?
You're like, girl, you know what the mental block is.
Is that what you're getting from this too?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm definitely getting that. I hear that. And I think she wants to know from us, like, what are the things that have really like helped us get there, that are not the like tactical things, but the like mindset and getting out of your own way to get to from maybe where she is in revenue to $1 million a year.
Okay, so the first thing that came to mind for me was thinking back to that same stage and what had to change at that point. And I think the mental block that I had was putting more money into the business, like investing in hiring or getting help or investing in paid advertising. Like there were things that I was very reticent to spend money on that once I did, we started making a lot more money. Yeah. But it was that first like, I don't want to like, it feels like you're not, for me, I should be speaking in first person. For me, it felt like I was afraid I had this mentality of like, this is here to put money in my pocket, not to take money out of it. So that was like a weird hurdle I had to get over, but it was ultimately something that once I did it, I was like, oh, this is like a force multiplier on outcomes when you can start spending money strategically.
What were some of the first things you strategically spent money on?
An email marketing person who was way smarter than me, who knew exactly how to launch things and just kind of would be like, yeah, this is the playbook. And actually, I'm not even just going to give you the playbook. I'm going to execute it for you. Boop, up and to the right, like immediately. It was like unbelievable. So I think that was a big thing. And my first year at Morning Brew, we invested like $200K in paid advertising to grow the newsletter audience.
Yeah.
That was humongo, because once we got the newsletter audience to the place where, and again, it's like, you're not using paid advertising on things that are just like vanity metrics. It's not like I'm just like, I just want more followers. It was like, we knew that if we could hit a certain number of subscribers in this newsletter, we could charge $10,000 to a brand to put their logo at the top of one. So like very quickly you make that investment back, but it was a big, again, it's like a mental hurdle of are we willing to take the bet, right? So those were two major things that like initially I was very I was like, I don't know, like I'm like happy with 1 to 200K, but then to get to 7, it was definitely about investment.
That really resonates with me too. You actually had me go think about like where I was, who I was at that time when I was making those revenue numbers, and I definitely was going through this whole drama with myself because I could see my friends, particularly my friend Danielle Leslie, who was like really investing in herself. She was getting coaches. She was doing like VIP workshop days with like people who were exactly where she wanted to be, or like networking with them and like sitting down with them. She was like really investing in herself, not just like the business, but like herself as a leader. And like I was watching her really skyrocket past me, and I like had a moment to myself where I was like, what's the difference then between what she's doing and what you're doing? And the main difference was that she was actively investing in herself and in her leadership skills. And I think going back to Bria's question, like I think for me, the biggest thing that has helped me get past some of those, like I went through like a weight loss journey. I think people like when you like experience just ups and downs with your weight and your health in general, like the plateau, right? Like there's this plateau that happens with your body in the same way that it happens in business. The things that have helped me get through the plateaus have been my personal quality of just being really willing to like regularly level myself up. Because like, for example, I even look at like the last year of business where like one quarter is like, okay, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to really get good at scorecarding as a leader. And I'm going to like bring all of my team with me. That's what I'm going to do this quarter. And then the next quarter is like, okay, we're going to get really good at quarterly planning, like really great quarterly planning rituals that are clear where everybody knows exactly what we're doing. I'm going to level up my skill set and doing that. I'm going to learn how to do that. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to get really good at like leading my team through questions, asking questions to them as opposed to me telling them everything and then being reliant on me to like give them all the guidance. I'm just going to like ask dumb questions and have them arrive at. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to level that up next quarter with like briefs. We're going to be doing lots of brief writing, kind of like how the Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos does. And so like every quarter, every month, I'm doing a thing to level up my own leadership. And that's been things that like really get through the plateaus, this personal quality of being willing to like level myself up.
And was Eamon your coach? Was he a part of guiding you through that process and giving you some of those tools?
For sure. So Eamon has been really good, but I also have had lots of coaches all throughout. It's actually really rare that I go through a time period that's very long where I don't have a coach at all. And maybe I take little breaks to like integrate right? But then I go, okay, evaluate what do I need next. So like coaching and even if you didn't do coaching and you just went and got resources, it speeds it up when you have coaching, because someone can be like, okay, let me tell you how I did it.
That is exactly what I was going to say, actually, because I think I've talked on the show before about how I was very reluctant.
You were skeptical.
To work with one and very skeptical. And I think I maintain like a healthy level of cynicism about this type of stuff just because I think I don't want to be taken advantage of. But
for sure.
I have an example from this week where I have been working with a coach for about a month, and I was having this moment where I was feeling a little bit insecure about something I was writing about. And so I sat back and I went, why am I insecure about this? It's like, okay, I'm insecure about it because it feels like it's straying too far from talking about the tactics. And it feels like people just want me to give them answers and to be the one with the answers. And this feels like this is like the second week in a row that I've written about something that's just more personal and vulnerable and about like these broader philosophical things. And so I voice memo her and I'm like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is where it is, like blah, 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 blah. And she voice memos me back and she goes, I just want to remind you that this is because you are in an evolution where you are growing beyond being the formulaic, prescriptive, tried and true, this is how people talk about money. And you're now evolving into the place where you see yourself as like, no, I am the brand and this is what I'm here to do and say. And that I'm venturing into this more complex space now because I'm ready for that. And it was something that I probably would have spent a few weeks waffling about and feeling weird about and then like trying to get back to the tactics and be like, oh, let me go back to this thing that feels really good. Let me go back to this thing that feels really comfortable. And just I was able to process it and move past it in one night. Yeah. Because she was there to reframe it for me immediately and reflect back to me what I needed to hear. And I think that is the value of when you say it's the speed, exactly, because you're not spending a lot of time caught up in the drama of the whatever.
Figuring it out yourself.
So I do think that there's a lot of value in that.
Well, Bria, thank you so much for sending in your question. And if you are listening to this and watching this and you have questions that you want us to use as sparks of conversation that we have on the show and answer for you and give you our opinions on, please send them to us. You can DM us on social media or write in the comments or send us an email as well.
Yes, the email's bossyshow@morningbrew.com, I believe.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good. We're going to wrap up there. Tell us in the comments if you would consider doing a co-op structure, being part of one, a profit-sharing structure, being part of one. We'd love to hear kind of your whys.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging out with us.